is Sage Bennett. I have been an AFA student for quite some time. This might be my first art talks, but this certainly won't be my last. So in order to go into my influences, let's talk about where we are, right? We're in the state of Utah. We're pretty iconic and well known for some things. So something that we're well known for is gelatin. So let's talk about the Utah Tower. So yes, this is a plate of gelatin. However, there's a condom in this gelatin. And if you didn't know what a condom is, and I really hope that you do know what a condom is, it's a protective measurement used in sexual intercourse. So taboo is something that is banned on the grounds of morality or taste. So this gelatin condom probably wouldn't be accessible in the Utah public just because sex education is something that's commonly talked about. An experience from my sexual education, I guess, influences was I was making this one print for relief printmaking about a popped condom, and I was vigorously stamping this painted on condom on a piece of paper, and someone came into the room and said, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, it's a popped condom." And they said, "Well, what is that?" You know, and they started pointing to this condom, and I was really surprised that my education that I had received in Las Vegas was a lot different than the educational system that people perceive in Utah, and the fact that people haven't seen a condom in real life before kind of is baffling. So let's talk about culture again. Within Utah culture, we have what's called Mormon ads, right? And these ads are supposed to kind of teach you something. My ad kind of has this notation on a very dangerous sex education program called The Parable of the Licked Cupcake, and we'll get into that. So my Mormon ad says, "You wouldn't want to be a licked cupcake. A pure cupcake is clear and unchanging in the presence of an omnipotent being. Do not allow others to persuade you into a little lick. Nobody wants a cupcake who dry humped her boyfriend once. After all, you are to have no normal sexual experience until your awkward wedding night." And this kind of assimilates to me because this is something that I experienced going into Mormonism, and is something that I feel like makes people leave because they're not respected as individuals who go through sexual experiences, whether they want to or whether they do. So, just to name a few, here are some of my influences. We have Mr. Rogers, Schoolhouse Rock, Jack Stauber, and VHS tapes. And of course, my favorite, we have vintage Christian sex education programs. So, let's get into my 12-minute animation. So with the Parable of the Licked Cupcake, let's play what that parable plays out to be.
For today's lesson, I have 2 delectable cupcakes for the both of us. One for me, and one for you. You're welcome. What's that? You have no desire to eat this cupcake? Ah, yes. It appears that this cupcake is used. However, I do think this used cupcake would be a great example in a chat about chastity. For young women, this cupcake represents us. Do we not want to be a pure, unadulterated cupcake? Rather, a disgusting, used cupcake? No, we don't. Well, you are absolutely correct. Quite frankly, I pity a licked cupcake. For the young men watching our program today, wouldn't you feel the same? This cupcake still represents young women. As young men, it is important to not lick cupcakes that are not yours. After all, we wouldn't want to lick cupcake ourselves. Remember, children, it is important to keep our bodies pure for ourselves and our omnipotent being. That is all we have time for today.
So, with my show comes this really interesting philosophy. So before this sex education program really kicks into gear, Rivera said, by Barbara Agnes, who is this sex educator. She says, "Dear mighty being, I want to extend your presence within our program and finding purpose within our bodies." So this kind of stems from the philosophy of people that don't really teach a certain gospel, they teach their own gospel. And I feel like it's something that affects people tremendously, especially when it involves a topic that is comparing your body to something that is used. You know, we're not really used. I mean, we use our bodies for everyday things, but I mean, in the context of this, it demeans from our personal experiences. So, as the sex education progresses with my 12-minute animation, we find that there is this dialogue between two vibrators, right? And so this kind of symbolizes my relationship with my mother and how we don't really have any good relationships in terms of talking openly about sexual experiences and sexual health. And it's kind of crazy because she used to preach in our household, you know, sex ed shouldn't be taught on an educational level, it should be taught in the home. But it was never taught in the home. So these conversations that are happening within my animation are conversations that I would like to have had with my mother, and I'm planning on elevating that relationship to where I can be open about talking about things that should be talked about in a household. And it's this idea of genuine conversations that validate sexual experiences, your worth as an individual, and your sexuality. This is important for understanding an individual, and I feel like that's often the big separation between people is there's a lack of understanding of where the person has been with their sexual experiences, or there's just a lack of understanding of who the person is. There's just a predetermined judgment as soon as someone talks about sexual experiences. And this kind of breaks the safety net into talking about things that may not involve sexual intercourse necessarily. It involves consent, and it involves people taking advantage of you. These conversations are so detrimental, and when you don't have that understanding and safety implemented, the relationship just realistically isn't there. So I wanted to skip to, so in my animation I talk about masturbation. And so let's talk about masturbation as like a quick run through. So masturbation in terms of my video is this act of self-discovery. Now, I'm not connotating masturbation with pornography, because let's face it, pornography is like a triple-edged sword, you know? It's not really ethically okay. People get taken advantage a lot, and there's also people who are addicted to porn. Now, there are good facets of porn, but those facets are something that you have to buy from a particular person and not a company. So that's the quick run-through of pornography. But in my case, this is talking mostly about masturbation, because I don't really think that they should have the connotation. They can be done together, but masturbation shouldn't be associated with being unhealthy. It is actually proven to be very healthy and beneficial to sexual experiences to those who desire them. I do want to go to a dialogue about sexuality, because something that is neglected in sex education programs are discussions on sexuality. It's not present within them.
The program we watched is limiting in terms of its information. What makes you say that? Well, to start, teaching people to feel worthless about sharing intimacy with someone affects our Sexuality is a spectrum that really everyone contributes to. Whether you are physically attracted to a person or if you are in love with someone of the same sex.
If it applies to everyone, then why isn't same-sex relationships or asexuality talked about in sex education?
People teach with their opinions a lot of the time. They say they support you, blah, 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 and then they turn around and make laws against you, contradicting their love.
That's rude.
And this dives into a community that I'm a part of, the LGBTQ+ community. And it's important to have these conversations because if you don't have these conversations, it leads to people essentially bullying those who are outcasted. When you don't put people within a program, they're often perceived as outcasters. So if we don't have positive sex education programs that actually talk about sexuality and the LGBTQ+ community, we're just going to see more violence within our communities against those individuals. This is something that truly benefits everybody.